Hey, what's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here from Wall Street Mastermind. I'm here today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm excited to have Takashi on with me. Takashi is one of our clients that just finished his summer internship recruiting process for summer 2021. So he's also the reason I'm really excited to have him on is he's one of our first clients to recruit for banking in Asia. So I wanted to get him on here to talk about that experience a little bit, just because I'm sure it's a bit different from recruiting here in the U.S. So for those of you who are interested in recruiting for Asia, definitely want to check this interview out. So Takashi, thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, to just give a brief background on myself, I'm originally from Clifton, New Jersey, and I actually go to Cornell University, and I'm a junior, majoring in industry and labor relations. But I actually transferred from Rutgers Business School after spending like my freshman year there.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then I essentially decided to join Wall Street Mastermind because, figuring out what career path I want to take within finance, definitely came across investment banking, and then but I don't really have any background information or any resources or even connections to understand like what the process is even like, let alone go through the process. So I came across Sam and then Wall Street Mastermind, and I thought it was a great resource to help me get into banking. So that's one of the reasons why I joined.
Got it. That makes sense. So let's go back to the beginning. So because something you mentioned, which I think is interesting for people to hear about. Like you started out at Rutgers your freshman year, which is obviously close to home because you're from Jersey, and then you decided to transfer to Cornell. I think that was actually right around the time you joined was when you were just finishing up at Rutgers, and right
Mhm.
before you transferred to Cornell. Now, obviously Cornell is a great school, but like what made you want to transfer?
Yeah, so when I applied to Cornell in high school, I actually had the transfer option, meaning like as long as I spent my freshman year at a different university,
Hmm.
I could just transfer as a sophomore and then, graduate at Cornell. So I essentially took the transfer option and I just spent my freshman year at Rutgers, and it's just more of like a family thing where it's like, just in case, financial or something doesn't work out, you just stay at Rutgers. So I think it's better
Hmm.
to just go to a state school freshman year
Yeah,
rather than like community or something,
yeah,
and then just transfer in.
got it. Okay. So then when you were at Rutgers or when you were leaving Rutgers, you hadn't really done anything yet as far as investment banking recruiting goes. Like you had just started to think about going into banking, and that's kind of like when you joined Wall Street Mastermind. Is that right?
Oh yeah, that's correct.
Okay, got it. So then you joined Wall Street Mastermind. Like, what did you like? Talk to us about your kind of recruiting journey after joining Wall Street Mastermind. Like, how was it? I mean, recruiting is always tough, obviously, but like, how was it for you personally? And like, what did you kind of like get out of being in a program like Wall Street Mastermind?
Yeah, so in terms of the program, it was definitely helpful in terms of having like a path laid out that you just take, and as long as you put in the work, you get something out of it. So it's like rather than doing everything on your own and then not knowing if you're even doing it right, or even like worst case scenario, you don't even know if you're like you may be doing something wrong and you don't even know that you're doing right. So in that case, it's like Wall Street Mastermind is definitely helpful in that there's a foundation that you like as long as you follow and you're active within that program, you definitely are able to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So in terms of that, recruiting is definitely it's difficult. It's like it's very like mentally challenging sometimes. So you definitely like make use of like the support group and the other students that are going through recruiting as well to literally bounce off of each other, with the like, any questions that you got in interviews, or even like questions about the recruiting timeline for some of these banks. So in that case, the program is definitely useful, and then being prepared for interviews, so you don't end up making embarrassing yourself without being able to answer a question. So in that case, the program is definitely useful.
Got it. Okay. What what was the hardest part of investment banking recruiting for you? Would you say?
I guess the hardest part was like I guess networking,
Okay.
because definitely it's challenging because you're essentially cold calling these people you don't really know, and they're very busy people. So sometimes they might be a little bit moody, so they might rub off on the wrong way on you.
Mm.
So it's definitely a numbers game. So you're never gonna have a good call with every banker that you talk to. Some
Yeah.
of them are gonna be very rough on you and very abrasive, and you're just gonna be like, what the heck was that? But at the end of the day, it is a numbers game. So you definitely start off like awkward with each phone call, and then by the time you're on your like X amount of phone calls, then you definitely are master or become very good at it. So
Yeah.
in that sense, just follow the program, follow what you need to say, the email format that they give you, the questions that that you should ask. Come prepared to the networking call, and be very diligent in whatever you do, and make sure that you're paying attention so you can continue to you know have that follow-up questions, and have that relationship building before you go into recruiting, so by the time recruiting does roll around, you have that referral or any sort of guidance that you need from them.
Got it. So one thing sounds like one thing that was helpful for you is just having like all the templates and the emails and the scripts and frameworks to use when it comes to networking, so that you don't have to try and figure out like, am I saying the right things, or how do I get these people to respond to me, or what questions should I be asking, what questions should I not be asking? Like everything's kind of already laid out for you, and you just have to follow the instructions basically.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, I guess, like, if you compare yourself to people outside of the program, people like have that general idea that, yeah, like, if you want to get into this field, you have to, network, right? People know that you're going to network, and then you hopefully get that referral. That's like the general idea that everyone understands. But when it comes to like, how do you do it? And then like, what do you do? Like, how do you go about doing that? Then the program, like, quote unquote, gives you like a cheat sheet. It gives you upper hand when it comes to like how you go about it, and then nailing everything that you need to do when it comes to networking and
Mm.
getting that referral. So in that sense, yeah, the program is definitely gives an upper edge compared to other students.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So networking is a big help for you. And then like I think one thing that would be really helpful for people for us to talk about is just like the recruiting process in Japan, because like I said, you're one of our first clients to recruit in Asia. And so even I myself am very uh, personally curious about like the similarities and differences between how recruiting is done over there and how recruiting is done over here, right? Like, did you, first of all, I guess a couple questions, like, what was the process like with the banks in Asia? Like, because you interview with mostly Bulge back at banks there, right?
Right.
Um, is the process similar or different to how they do things in the States? And if there's a difference, like, what would you say is the difference?
Yeah, so I guess yeah, it's definitely different from the recruiting from the States. Just like, I guess, like, the big thing is like the timeline. It's so for over there in Japan, they usually like recruit, or for I guess, so there's two different ways that they recruit. So they take some of their kids from people just studying in the students just studying in Japanese universities or colleges, and they take a portion of their class from international students, so people studying in the States. So like for people studying in Japan, like Japanese universities and colleges, the recruiting timeline is it's like usually during the fall time, so it's a little bit slower than the U.S. who started like usually in the summer or something, or even before. And then but for
The
students that are in,
fall of junior year, that is.
oh yeah, fall of junior year, so it'd be
Okay.
like October/November-ish,
Okay.
and that's when like applications end. And then like, well, for students who are studying in the States, aka that was like me, because I'm studying in the US, even though like I was never in Japan to begin with, but I just like, I guess, speak Japanese, so kind of helped me out. But yeah, they look for like, I guess, bilingual people who could speak both Japanese and English, and they have like that study abroad or like international experience.
Mhm.
For those people, the application starts in the summer, but interviews and like they won't start reviewing until like September, and then interviews won't roll out until like end of September, beginning of October. And then yeah, so they'll have like interviews like all throughout October, and then they usually want to give out the offer by the beginning of November. Oh, and then the way that they recruit international students is they have like a career fair, where like not just like banks, but like a lot of just like companies. It's like tech companies or like even like insurance companies. They come to Boston every year, like at the beginning of November, and then that's where they attract all the international students to interview, and then like essentially give them offers. So it's like usually you want to start the process early as you can. So by the time on November rolls around, like beginning of November, the career fair, it's like mostly just final rounds, and you don't have to deal with like the entering your entry sheet or any or like giving out your resume at the booth. So as long as you understand that is like a good way to make sure you just laying all your interviews, but before then go to Boston for your final round and then get the offer hopefully.
Got it. Okay, so you didn't get your interviews at that career fair, but by the time you went to the career fair in November, you just went there for the final round.
Yeah, that's usually what people who understand how like the career fair works know. So they're prepared and they already have interviews prior to going to Boston. And then Boston is usually just the final round. It's like it's possible to like get an offer doing nothing and then just going to Boston and then like giving your resume at the booth of the company.
Yeah.
But it's like you need to really be like a hot shot where like, oh, this applicant is really he's like, we should like interview him. But even then, those applicants, like hotshot applicants, they understand how the like process works, so they never usually just go to the booth like on the day, and they do everything beforehand for the most part.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So you mentioned that they take some of their kids from Japanese universities and some from international students. Do you happen to know kind of roughly what that breakdown is? Like, is it 80-20, 70-30? Like, do you have a sense?
I honestly wouldn't know that much. It's just like I just know that like usually typically in a class it's mostly filled by Japanese university students. So in that aspect, I guess it's definitely less than 50-50. So they only pick up like a handful of students from like studying in the US.
Okay, got it. So it's not like there's a ton of opportunity. Like it's still a pretty competitive
Yeah,
process.
it's still competitive, but yeah, it's but the number of applicants is definitely lower.
Yeah.
So if that helps, yeah.
Okay, understood. Um, did you ever spend any time in Japan, or you grew up here your entire life?
I grew up in the States my entire time, but I just like attended Japanese school like on the weekends.
Okay.
So like, I was able to, learn Japanese.
Okay, got it. Um, and the interviews were mostly in Japanese, not English, right?
Yeah, most of my interviews were in Japanese, and then there's like I guess I had like one interview where the interviewer was like, "Oh, did you interview in Japanese like earlier?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." He was like, "Okay, let's just do English then." I'm like, "Okay." So it's just like it's definitely they try to like make sure it's less interview like I guess, even though it is an interview, it's like they want to try their best to make it a conversation, but
Right. So like, how fluent would you say you have to be able to pass these interviews? Like, do you have to be? I don't know how fluent you are in Japanese, but it sounds like since you grew up here, like, you're probably not like at the native level of fluency, right? I'm guessing you're kind of. I mean, it's still you like speak it at home with your parents, maybe, and that's about it.
yeah, so in terms of what they require, it's like minimum like business level or like fluency in Japanese.
Mhm.
So like in that aspect, like yeah, like I had to like make sure like my Japanese was on point, but it was very difficult because I don't usually speak it when I'm in college.
Mhm.
So it was definitely hard, but they do like want a person who like let's say you put them in a client meeting or something with a Japanese client because you're in Japan, like they expect you to be able to talk intelligently, and then like without like stuttering. So in that aspect, they do require like Japanese proficiency to like I guess like close to native level essentially. But and then it also depends on like the division you're in. So like for investment banking, like they usually do require native level Japanese or, up to par to that level. But, different divisions like sales and trading where you don't really need that much, like, I guess like communications if you're like a trader. Then they don't require that much Japanese, but yeah, for IB, they do require it. So in that sense, I was like, it was nerve-wracking interviewing because some of these questions were like really easy, or like I knew the answer, but it was like a matter of like if I could regurgitate my English answer into Japanese, and then like would they like understand the answer, and then like if they will buy the answer too. So
Right.
I think yeah, it worked
Right.
out.
Interesting. Okay. Definitely a unique set of challenges. And so, in terms of the interview process itself, like here in the States with a lot of these bulge bracket banks is maybe, you do a higher view, and if you pass the higher view, then you do a super day, and then the super day is like, multiple interviews back to back, and if you pass that, then you get the offer, right? Is the process similar in Japan, or is it different? Like, how many rounds did you have to go through, and what was that like?
Yeah, so I definitely for board brackets in Japan, it's definitely different from the ones that you say. There's no higher view, and if you pass the higher view, you go straight to a super day. So like for Japan, there wasn't really a super day, so I was just like really surprised when they like told me that I got the offer. So you start off with the higher view, and then it was basic questions, and then it was like 10 questions too. There was like 10 questions, like
The
I guess
higher
like yeah, there was like 10 questions for the higher view, at least for Bank of America, and then like I think like 6 or 7 of them were in Japanese, and then like the rest were like in English, or like you had to answer in English. And then after you get past the high view, you get your first round, and then like each round, it's like you're just talking to like one like junior level employee and one senior level employee, and
Hmm.
then they're usually back to back. So it's like for my case, it was like 20 minutes with the junior employee and then 20 minutes with the senior employee back to back. And then like each round, you're just talking to like one junior and then one senior level employee, and then you just do like multiple rounds of that, and then if they like you enough, they like give you an offer. So it's like I guess like they just start off with like an X amount of applicants, and every round you talk to, they just like cut off some people who just don't have like the certain requirements. Let's say like having like that market knowledge or just being up to date with the current events, and if you can't answer like stuff like behavioral questions as well, they just like knock you out, and then like you just keep going with different employees within the firm, and then like if you pass like if you check all their boxes that they're looking for, and they essentially give you the offer.
Got it. So how many rounds in total did you have to go through?
So for Bank of America, I went through three rounds of interviews.
Okay. So 3 rounds, and then each round is two 20-minute interviews. So you met 6 different people for 20
Yeah,
minutes
I met 6 different people, correct. Yeah,
on top of the higher view with 10 questions.
all right.
Got it. Okay, cool. And then like in terms of the types of questions that they were asking you, I mean, obviously I know it's in Japanese for the most part, whereas typically it's in English, but aside from the language difference, the questions themselves, like, is it pretty much the same questions, or are they asking you kind of different questions?
Oh, like
Like,
within like
is it the same as the questions that, because like typically like when we prepped you for the behaviorals, like we are like, hey, these are the questions that you should prepare for, and this is how you should answer these questions, and then we come up with your answer and whatnot, right?
all right.
Were those like kind of the same, like the questions that we expected you to get? Were they the same type of questions in Japan, or are the Japanese office is asking something totally different because
Uh,
maybe there's a
yeah,
cultural difference or
all
something?
right. Yeah, so like literally all the questions that were asked for Japan, it was literally like any question that you could see on the the question guide that the Wall Street Mastermind has. So like I don't remember any time that I was asked a question. I was like, how do I answer this? Or like, what do I say? Like every question that I received was like, yeah, like I was expected, or like, yeah, like I remember like reading it on like the question guide, or and then like answering, like like typing out my answer. So like there was never a question where I wasn't like prepared for, or like that caught me off guard.
Yeah,
Essentially, because like most of the questions that it's honestly just general questions that that investment banker expects you to know if you're like interested in the position.
got it, got it. So basically, in other words, because we get this question a lot, like sometimes we talk to students, maybe now they're not like studying the U.S. and then trying to recruit for another geography. But sometimes we talk to students like in Europe, like they go to school in Europe or they go to school in Asia, and they're just trying to recruit locally. And then they're always wondering, like, well, I mean, is what you teach in Wall Street Mastermind actually going to be applicable? Because I'm not trying to recruit for the U.S. And we always tell them that, I mean, look, investment banking is the same everywhere, right? Like the job itself does not change aside from the language. And
Right.
so the traits and the qualities that these interviewers are looking for are pretty much going to be the same, right? It's not like in the US, they look for one set of qualities, and then in Japan, they look for a different set, and in London, they look for something else altogether. It's like pretty much they ask similar questions because they're testing for the same things. Right?
Right.
Would you say that's accurate?
Oh yeah, that's accurate. And then yeah, especially if you're like applying for like void brackets within your geographical location, like they're gonna like look for certain qualities that are very similar like in any office that you're in. So
Mm.
like any of the most of the questions I receive is just like like honestly in my opinion it might be a little bit like less grilling than like the New York officer or something like the U.S. location. So
Okay.
like honestly, it's fair to say that Wall Street Mastermind, like in a sense, like over prepares you for some of these behaviors. So like when you go in there, you're confident and like you expect what questions they're gonna ask you, and you're definitely like you could easily like nail every question they ask you.
Got it. Because when we're preparing you to like the standard of, hey, how do we pass the interviews in New York? Because that's where most of our clients are trying to go. But
Right.
if you're good enough to pass the New York interviews, where it's way more competitive, then you're going to be more than ready to go and pass interviews in your locations. Is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess the one thing we didn't do a good job of preparing you for, though, is teaching you how to answer these questions in Japanese, right?
Oh yeah, right. That's something you gotta do on your own. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
I need to go find someone who can coach you guys on how to answer these questions in Japanese. I don't have anyone like that on my team. Uh, but joking aside, that was probably honest. Like since you knew what questions to expect and you knew how you want to answer, the toughest part for you wasn't like coming up with the answers. It was probably like figuring out in your head how to translate the answer you've already prepared from one language to another, right? Because I know like I'm bilingual, I speak Mandarin, but sometimes when I try to do translations from English and Mandarin or Mandarin to English, like it's not as straightforward as just like saying the exact same things. Like the
right,
sentence structures are different, the grammar is different. Sometimes if you just do a direct translation, things don't really make sense, right? Did you kind of run
right.
into the challenge?
So yeah, so like it's like now it's not the content of the answer, it's just more of like being able to like formally, present the content
Yeah,
concisely and like without, stuttering or making any, minor mistakes.
yeah.
So like yeah, every time like I knew how to like interview coming up, it's like less so like preparing like what I want to say, but like just making sure like, I was able to like regurgitate everything I wanted to, convey.
Got it. Got it. That's awesome, man. So ultimately, I think you already alluded to this, but basically, so you'll be going to Bank of America then in the Tokyo office for some.
Right.
Okay, got it. And that group there is basically regional coverage for Japan, and they work on all industries and all products. Like you just rotate across your generalists, or do you know what you'll be doing there?
Yeah, it'll be a generalist program, and then they combine investment banking with capital markets. So
Okay.
definitely, they did ask for my preference, but most likely it'll just be like a rotation thing. Figuring, going to different industries or product groups.
Got it. Okay. Very cool, man. Well, that's awesome. I guess one last question for you. I mean, this has been super enlightening, not just for our listeners, but even for me too. But one last question for you. So, do you have any advice for people who may be in a similar situation as you? Maybe they want to recruit for um, a different office. Maybe they want to go to Asia. Or maybe they're in the States, they want to go to Asia, or maybe they're already abroad and they're listening to this right now. Like maybe they go to school in Asia, or they go to school and they want to recruit locally. Like, do you have any advice for people who are trying to do that? Maybe something that you wish someone else had told you back when you first started this process.
Yeah. So I guess one of the advice that I would give some students is start early. I guess like I think it's it's something that's said by everyone. I feel like that goes through recruiting, but the reason why I say you best start early is because if you start early, you could definitely have more opportunities to look at. So you could do a lot more research when it comes to whether what bank I want to apply to, like what location I want to apply to, because once the application closes, it closes, right? There's no turning back time and then applying again. So it's like once you start early and then you have all like the back end stuff of like you know networking, having all your behavior questions like typed out and like rehearsed, memorizing like the technical questions. Once you do like all that preparation stuff, earlier, and then by the time like recruiting does roll around, you're not like flustering all like, oh, like what do I have to do to like snag like the internship. You just by then you're prepared and you know exactly what you need to do. So then once that happens, then you just like essentially become a robot and you just go through every interview, with the mindset of like I'm confident I'm gonna be able to successfully answer all these questions and I'm prepared and like I'm in a good situation. And then like you just get into that zone of like it just comes down to it's just a numbers game. It's like I just have to snag one. So then just like as all these interviews roll out, you're just like okay, just like I just got to get one job out of all this. And then as long as you apply to all these companies, you're essentially gonna get one, right? So in that case, as long as you
Hopefully.
yeah, hopefully, no promises, but the higher number of applications you submitted, the greater chance you have of getting into banking. So in that case, once you get started early and have making sure you have that mindset of of a long recruiting journey, there always is a light at the end of the tunnel as long as you follow everything the program tells you to do
Yeah.
and you have that mentality to dig deep and make sure you go through recruiting with a very tough-minded attitude. It's there's always something good waiting for you as long as you put in the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's great advice. I mean, I tell people that all the time, which is all you need is one offer, right?
Right.
But of course, like given how selective and competitive it is, um, the more opportunities you have, the more at bats you give yourself,
Right.
the more likely it is that you're going to get an offer. So absolutely starting early is critical because also now that you're on the other side and you look back on this, this, there's just so much work that goes into something like this, right?
Right.
Not only are you trying to be a full-time student and keep your grades up in school, but you're networking, like you say, you're having all these networking conversations, and those aren't really that fun, right? If we're being totally honest about it. You have to learn all your technicals, you have to learn all your behaviorals. There's just all these things you have to do, and then you also you're a college student, you have a social life, you want to have friends and stuff, and so the earlier you start, the easier it is to kind of juggle all these things as opposed to like if you're trying to rush it out at the last minute. I mean, first of all, a lot of these applications happen so early now that if you start late, it's just there's nothing you can even do. But
Right.
even the ones that don't open early, like you being so busy and trying to cram everything into like just 24 hours that you have in a day, it's very, very difficult to do, right? Or it's very difficult to do well. So I think that's great advice, man. So I think, look, guys, for those of you that are still listening, my biggest takeaway from this really is just like getting a better understanding of what it's like to recruit outside of the U.S., like more specifically in Japan. But I think this also applies to other offices in Asia, like Hong Kong, or maybe even London and places like that. But the one question that I was really curious about, because I always get asked by people, is just like, you know, how relevant is the stuff that we're doing here in Wall Street Mastermind for non-US recruiting, right? Like, I mean, I know because people know that we've helped a ton of people get into banking in the US, but obviously we haven't really focused on these other markets because the US is the biggest market, right? And it's where we're based, and so we just started there. But for these other markets, like if you are interested in recruiting for those, at least based on Takashi's experience, everything that we're doing in the program is still relevant. Like the questions you're going to get asked are still the same questions. If you have a good answer prepared or it's good enough, to get you the job here in New York, it's most likely definitely going to be good enough for you to get jobs in these other areas as well, right? So um, that's that's my biggest takeaway from today. But I think for those of you that if you're recruiting for other offices, like even maybe you're studying in the U.S. but you want to go to a different country after you graduate, or maybe you want to go back to your home country. Maybe you came from there, or maybe you're abroad right now already, and maybe you're local. Maybe you're in Asia. You're going to school there, and you want to recruit. Um, Even in those situations, if you need help with recruiting, feel free to reach out to us. And if you want to talk to someone on our team to see what we could potentially help you with, you could start by booking a free strategy session with us. You can do that by going to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST, so it's really wallstmastermind.com/apply. And someone on our team will hop on with you, and we'll talk to you and learn more about your situation and understand what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish, and more importantly, what are the challenges that are currently preventing you from getting there. And if it sounds like we can help you with whatever it is that you're struggling with, we're definitely happy to walk you through that. And if not, and we don't know how to help you with it, then at a minimum, we'll still just give you some advice on what we think we would do if we were in your shoes. Okay, so hopefully, we get to talk to you someday, but if not, regardless, like best of luck with all your recruiting processes. And Kashi, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to come on here and talk to us today. And this was again super insightful, not just for me, but also for everyone else that's listening, I'm sure. And huge congrats on your offer and getting into Bank of America. And I'm sure you're gonna have a blast over there in Japan over the summer. So enjoy that and keep us posted on all of your progress.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great, talking about my experience, and hopefully it helps some of you guys get a better understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, guys, that'll be it for today. And thank you guys for tuning in. And we'll be back with more of these for you guys again in the near future. All right. Talk soon. Bye.